Hello. So, apologies everybody for the lateness of today's show. So, I had my dinner and then started to feel a tad poorly. So I don't know if I would have eaten something funny yesterday. I did the same thing yesterday. So I wanted to start and then was slightly nauseous. Hello, Helen, hello. So also second apologies. So today's the 23rd of March. Second apologies. I said we might do like prepping one tonight. We're going to do it next week because my dehydrator is not coming until tomorrow. So I haven't had a play. I can't tell you what's easy, what's not easy. So I haven't been able to kind of do that or get the bits that I need to have a go at making one of those spark plug based things. Like forever plug things. I wanted to this is just going to be really kind of like whistle stop. Hey, Vic, this is going to be kind of like a whistle stop mini kind of like, and I mean mini. I know I normally say like it's going to be a mini one, and then like 2 hours later I'm still rambling on. So one of the things I try and do is understand the lies from as big a perspective as possible. So we do need to kind of understand the world from like really little micro perspectives. I'm such a mess. Sorry. But we also need to understand the world from like the big perspective of all of the lies that have been told on a really kind of we need to see like the entire spider web as well as all of the little webs that are offshoots. And what I find is people put themselves in silos, they put themselves in isolation, and they kind of really just hone in on one teeny tiny little area, and then things just don't make sense. And you know, if you're trying to speak to somebody who is asleep and you try to wake them up, like the first thing they say is, "But why would somebody do that? Like, I don't believe you because why would they do that?" And only when you kind of look at the big picture and you can say, well, actually this also happened here, they feed into here with evidence, can you start to turn people around? So the other really powerful way to kind of help people is by sharing information where they've walked information, where they've controlled, by they I mean like, you know, the buddies, where they've controlled and manipulated the narrative when it links to somebody's like special interest. So the thing that helped wake me up was my personal experience of coming through mental illness and not realizing I was mentally unwell, which is not surprising that you develop mental illness if you experience like a lot of trauma as a child, like you just do. And even to be fair, in reality, you don't need to have a lot of trauma either. You just need to have traumas at specific points in time, and it can be quite mild, but it could build up. So anyway, so if you've had trauma, you're going to develop mental illness. So because I had to kind of healed myself when I went to become a psychologist, and they were telling me stuff, I could just, my brain was calling bullshit on the things that they were saying because I knew it wasn't true, because I'd already proven them wrong. And I'm not special. Like, this is the key thing, is I'm not special. My brain works our brain this is hard. So because we have people who are atypical neurodevelopmentally. So I was about to say all of our brains work in the same way. They don't, but they all have the same conceptual way in which they function. Let me get this out. So kind of like the way that our bones all work, if we break a bone, they will knit themselves back together. Our brains do the same thing with regards to if we damage a portion of our brain, is our brain will kind of reroute and rewire. So when I say our brains all work in the same way, like that's what I mean. Not, we spoke a bit the other day about the difference between somebody who's got an autistic brain, and we did the whole funnel thing. But what I mean when I say they all work in the same way is, like, if your brain's damaged, your brain will reroute. We all have grey matter, we all have electrical impulses, we all carry signals. Like that is consistent. Kind of like all cars have engines. How they're wired up might be slightly differently. But if you lose a component of the engine, it's not going to work. Excuse me. You healed your brain, still healing. Yeah. And so for me, sorry guys. So for me, because I'd healed myself, the things that they were saying I could call bullshit. So that enabled me to open up to the possibilities that they were misrepresenting the reality of what we've been taught. And then because I was really interested in developmental psychology, I then found out that a lot of the tried, tested methods of how to help people were just like silenced and hushed up and ignored, like purposefully removed from being used in the education system across the world, just randomly. We stopped doing it this way and came up with like weird ways of doing it for no reason. Well, you say for no reason, but that's what was going on in my mind. I couldn't understand why they were doing these things, because all of the research was like, you don't do these things. So that enabled me to then kind of go down the path of, well, why would they do this? Well, because of money, right? Because of money. Because even with the NHS, is like they profit from people not being healed. They profit from the pharmaceutical companies. They profit because people have jobs, because people need to keep being re-healed. So even the NHS, which is supposedly like free healthcare, it's still a profit-making machine. And all of the people who run the CEOs of the hospitals get like 100 grand bonuses year in, year out. So it is still a money making machine. So think about what the person who you're trying to wake up, what is their thing, that they know something intimately, and they know that what is being perceived by society as the truth doesn't make sense. So my sister-in-law, she's a mechanic, and she gets really angry with the whole electric vehicles and the batteries and all of this shit, but they keep saying it's better for the environment, because it isn't. So the way that I slowly started waking her up was with all the old stuff. The Smithsonian photo of the electric car in the 1800s, and I was just like, yeah, this is crazy. Like, why aren't they giving us this, right? So what is their thing, and things that they will know that what we are being told just doesn't add up, but they haven't quite gone to play in the conspiracy world. So that's why we have to kind of step back and look at the entire spider web. We have to know that everything is interlinked, and everything is interlinked. And so while I'm kind of like wandering around with the dogs, or I've been driving across Shropshire today, which is why I had my dinner late. So the latest thing I've been reading, I say reading, I've not been driving and reading, I've been listening to. I tend to have a book on audio, on Audible, and then I will also get it on Kindle WhisperSync if I can, or I'll get the physical copy if they don't have WhisperSync. So I tend to have it running both ways, so that I can just highlight stuff. But the book that I've been listening to, I'm going to keep saying reading, and that's going to get me in trouble, is... where's my library? And actually, I don't know if you can still see, this is probably going to get me in trouble. So I don't know if you can still see like remnants of writing on my hand. I've tried to scrub, but I wrote it on with thick felt tip pen whilst driving. I was making notes. I'm driving down the country roads, like making notes from what I'm hearing, right? It's still safer than me grabbing my phone and taking screenshots. So been listening to Forbidden History, the hidden history of the human race. And I came across this as a YouTube video. Not necessarily this is a YouTube video, but there was a video and this guy was talking, and I went and found the book that he released. And this one's quite interesting because it does all tie in. So what I find is I ask for guidance, and I will be guided to hear something or watch something or listen to something. And then when I start listening, I'm usually like, oh, I don't know whether this is relevant. And then all of a sudden, like, the relevancy kicks in. So there's the book. It doesn't take long to listen to. So it's like two and a half hours. Do I think it's worth purchasing? Yes and no. Yes, because there's a lot of information in there that you probably won't be able to find anywhere else because the internet will have been scrubbed. Doesn't mean it's not true. And if you can find, we'll have references, so you will be able to potentially find it reported in books or in libraries, in the British Library or the Library of the actual physical libraries will probably still have the articles. Can you probably find the references on the internet? No. And also it's got a lot of the same thing, but from somebody different perspectives. So they did indeed. So what do I mean by they got the same thing? So it's kind of breaking down the hidden human history. And by that, with regards to completely discrediting and destroying Darwin's theory of evolution. So theory, his theory of evolution means it's never been proven, right? The same as gravitational theory, the same as theory of memory. All of these things means that somebody said, oh, this sounds like a goodish idea, but if it's a theory, it means it's not yet been proven. And what happens, and I mean, I know there's the controversy with regards to the fact that he stole it anyway, and all, but and interestingly, I was going through Darwin country because he's Shropshire, but actually his birthplace of Darwin is Shrewsbury, which is 20-minute drive. So as the audiobook was talking about Darwin, there was a sign that said, hello, welcome to Shrewsbury, birthplace of Darwin. And I was like, oh yeah, you fuck pig. So why does it matter? So in the audio and in the book, it talks about how that they found bones of human bones in portions of the earth where they shouldn't be. Right. And with regards to dating, talks about how, carbon dating can be manipulated on purpose, should they want to manipulate it on purpose. But that there's evidence that some of those bones, based on where they were dug up, rather than dated because they've gone off to a lab, but where they were dug up and what they were dug up alongside, or what they were encased in, over 20 million years ago, right? As in humans, as in human hour, shape and form. So not like supposedly ape-based things, and even the ape-based things, it was only like 100,000 years ago, is according to Darwin's theory, right, of evolution. 100,000 years ago we were dumb, and then all of a sudden we stood upright. But it's there was multiple places around the earth where they've done investigations and excavations, and there's bones from 3 million years ago, 5 million years ago. In England, there's bones of 5.5 million years ago. And technically, if you're going to believe the whole, we all started off in Africa and then the plates separated, and the only real humans' bones should be found in Africa if they're that old, if they do exist, and they're found in England and in other places, like millions of years old, found in America. And so all of these kind of archaeological findings were happening. Hey, Penelope, 1800s, right? 1850, which is the same time as Darwin's theory of evolution kind of first got deposited. And actually, I've known this for quite a while. When Darwin's theory of evolution kind of like came out, it was like a lot of people just said it was bollocks, right? And they tell you in school that the reason people thought it was bollocks was because they believed in God. Well, actually, the reason people thought it was bollocks was because they also had like evidence that it was just bollocks. And it didn't get cemented as a theory until the Java Man. And the Java Man is a head of a ape-ish like human with a human-based femur, were actually found 45 foot apart. So there's definitely no way they were the same. And even when they were dated independently, like, and when the guy was like showing everybody this, like everybody just like, they laughed him out of the kind of like archaeological circuit, right? They were just like, you're an idiot. That's two different species. That's so obvious. That's like an ape and that's a human. Like, and you didn't even find them in the same place. So we just don't believe you. And so then he disappeared, and what we find is that so 1850. So what was going on then? Smallpox randomly came out, and we have wars, right? So smallpox, then we have like First World War, then we have financial crash, we have scrubbing of history, and then Darwin's theory of evolution is really pushed again, and we go into World War II. And one of the reasons that they need Darwin's theory of evolution, the reason why it had to be the dominant theory, is because it's the theory that enables you to push epigenetics, right? So you also have to think about the other things that were going on. Is we were stopping the slave trade, like really ensuring that it wasn't happening. But they still needed to find that everything is done for their purpose, everything. So they needed to prove that the whole ape men thing was true, because that's a reason to treat non-white people in the way that they were being treated, right? It's to bolster their own eugenics movement, right? If they're stupid, if we're intelligent and they're stupid, then it doesn't matter. They're no better than animals, and we treat our horses this way, we treat our dogs this way. And bearing in mind at the same time is when they wouldn't let women read, because if we read more than 3 books in a year, our brains would implode. We were no longer allowed to have pockets in our clothing because we couldn't be trusted with money. We had to have a man give us money. So let's be careful about going all in on one particular narrative. So women were stupid, children were property. In England it was okay to rape your wife until the 1980s, because she was still property. So we didn't progress that well or that quickly. But so Darwinism was important because they need it for evolution. And if you then so Hitler got his ideas and his successful ideas from California. Who got their ideas from the United Kingdom, right? Who got their ideas, across Europe is, empire. Anyway, there's stories across the world of all of these really, really old human bones. And what was interesting about how and when they were finding a lot of these bones is they were finding them when they were down the coal mines and when they were down the tin mines. So it was just common miners who were, digging down, and then whoop, there's a femur, there's a human skeleton, and it's not a new human skeleton. Where the hell did this come from? And so that got me thinking about this whole climate narrative. Yes, climate's about control. Yes, they want fear. Yes, they want all of this shit, right? But they've been geoengineering the weather for climate narrative. But what that's also enabled them to do was shut down all the mines. Why was that important? Because the difference between us now and us 100, even, between us now and 10, 20 years ago, but actually back when we were all mining, was the ability that we have now to share things via social media. So if you think about how COVID has not gone to plan for the cabal, right? They have tried to scrub people from the internet. They've tried to bury science. They've tried to beat people into submission, and they haven't been blanketly successful, which they were with smallpox. So smallpox, it took 50 years, almost 60 years to overturn. What was it? 1858 to 1907. Almost 50 years to overturn the mandatory vaccination of smallpox. And that was because people were having to leaflet and they were, called anti-vaxxers, but people aren't stupid and people talk, right? So they never locked people down for smallpox. So they knew this time around, you have to make sure people can't talk. And they own social media and they own the internet, so they thought that would be easy to kind of control the narrative, right? So you can't have people talking and you can't have people sharing information. So I kind of thought, this is just kind of places that my brain goes while I'm driving, is because we don't go digging, right? We don't go digging and doing archaeological digs, and even if you do, they're all arranged by universities, and even if you do, like, things go missing, research gets quashed, and there was a really interesting piece of research which was submitted in 1970, which was turned down by peer review after peer review after peer review after peer review, and the lady who did it finally removed the article, and she removed it in 1975. And if you know about when Kissinger wrote his kind of depot plan, that was 1974 with the national, but they'd already submitted in the 60s pretty much stating we need to kind of like wipe out the Africans and the black and the lesser individuals, and they submitted that pretty much in the 60s, and a lot of countries kind of went, "Ooh, sounds a bit Hitlerish to me. I don't like that. Maybe let's like vote that down." And so then they came back in 1974 and called it like family planning. But so it was the second submission. But so the second submission happened in 1974. So again, so why Darwin was important, because we're still using the eugenics movement now. It's why they test, in the 50s and 60s in England, they were testing on English people without their knowledge, bioweapons and chemical weapons by our own Secret Service, but then they would do the same tests and worse to the colonies and Commonwealth, so just to see what the difference is depending on your skin color. And I always just think, well, just skin color, right? So that was important. but also, hey. Oh, interesting. So you can on Sundays whip your wife on the courthouse steps. Try it, mate. I mean, we have some strange laws in England. For quite a while, it was until like maybe about 20 years ago, it was okay to like shoot. Like if you're in York, you could kill a Welsh person on a Thursday after the market, as long as you used a bow and arrow and stuff like that. It was still a part of our laws. But it's really interwoven. So Rockefellers, and we all know about what they did with the banks, right? We all know what they did with the banks. But in 1909, which is the same year, GlaxoSmithKline had the all of the pharmaceutical companies and the media having a big old party and a fun time in London. So 1909. So we got, just before, I say just before, but just before we kind of get World War One. So this is 1907. They fucked up with smallpox, right? They didn't win. They fucked up. The people fought back. So this is the next 10 years ish. So between 1909 and World War One is where they are redeciding, like, okay, so we didn't have enough control, we didn't have enough, we couldn't manipulate the people enough to do what we needed them to do. So they go back to the drawing board, and they keep going back to the drawing board. What you find is the Rockefellers, they reconfigured their foundation into 5 different avenues. One of those avenues was archaeology, and science, and kind of like played in all the holes, right? So they know that they need to control the information, and we know what they did with the medical industry by, shutting down, not necessarily just the Rockefellers, but the cabal. But this was archaeology is Rockefeller, and then they all play together, right? So they shut down medicine, get rid of all natural healing, and everybody has to use the medicine that they want people to use. So it goes back to the archaeology as well. So anything that did not conform to Darwin's theory of evolution was suppressed. People lost their professorships, and so the people who were at the top of the industry. So it's the same as what we're seeing with COVID. So, doctor like Pierre Corey, I'm sure it's Pierre Corey, who like won an award in 2015, was given an award by the British Medical Association in 2015, was scrubbed from the internet, right? Because he was healing people from COVID. So the very same thing played out. So we've got almost 100 years of them controlling everything. And then, so multiple times, 60s, 70s, 80s, all of this information has been trying to come out. There's like expert saying that Bigfoot was real. In fact, in World War II, the Soviets were having a bit of a fight over near where Pakistan and Iran, over that area, and they follow one of the armies into a cave, and they get attacked by Bigfoot, right? And they have this actual dead Bigfoot, which is a big-footed person, which is bigger than a normal human, reddish brown hair, and they were trying to like pull the hair off as though it was somebody wearing fake fur to hide. And so they had like full autopsy of this person, right? So all of this information like keeps coming out, and it keeps being like pushed, ignored, and suppressed. And now Bigfoot's interesting because Ra mentions Bigfoot. So when Ra talks about the three different species that inhabit Earth, there's some inside Earth, some on Earth, and then Bigfoot. And Bigfoot kind of, they're the one, they're knocking around in case we do blow ourselves up using, we kind of do a bit of nuclear war. They survive. they can actually ensure that the Earth harvests, right? So they've been knocking around for ages too. So I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the Russians have got, the Ruskies have got, because they have released a lot about what's going on in Antarctica. And Putin is definitely working for the Russian people, which is against the cabal. So when my enemy of my enemy is my friend, sort of thing. So it was just. It was the fact that we're not allowed to do oil, we're not allowed to do coal mines, we're not allowed to get in our own grounds, right? If I was looking into boring a hole in the garden, and I was just like, oh, okay, well, if they're gonna like poison all the water, I'll just dig a well, because it's my garden. I'll just dig a well, because there will be water somewhere, because that's how we all used to function, right? I have to get permits. I have to get planning permission, and then I have to get it registered. I have to get it inspected, and I have to pay loads of taxes on it. My land. It's just like, are you joking? I'm assuming you have to dig down quite far, so it's not going to be just a spade jobby. And all of a sudden, my ornamental well, because you can buy those ornamental ones at the garden centre, all of a sudden it's actually a working well. And I know in some places in the US, you're not allowed to collect rainwater. Like, you're not allowed to collect the water that just lands. Are you taking a piss? So they put all of these kind of, they've sealed off our capacity to dig down, right? And when you first look at the child trafficking side of it, you think, oh, well, maybe they don't want people to see, accidentally stumble across one of the dumb tunnels. But also because, if you dig down and then you're like, oh, here's a human skeleton, the hell's it doing in this layer where the dinosaurs lived? And that was the other thing. So I've been skeptical about the dinosaurs because, it happened, they were being flaunted at around the same time as they started to really kind of manipulate things, 1800s. From what we can see, so from records that we can see, so they will have been manipulating things for a very long time, but we have records of where things did exist, and all of a sudden history's changed, right? So that's, I'm looking at written records that I have access to. It's around like the smallpox is kind of the beginning of the end of the beginning. Is they kind of just stopped us digging. Stopped us getting into the ground. So being skeptical of dinosaurs, because all of a sudden, like, no history of, on the caves where they depict UFOs and aliens, there's no like dinosaur shaped animals. And you immediately think, well, that's because humans didn't exist when dinosaurs existed. Okay. But all of a sudden, you're just kind of walking along, you do a teeny tiny little bit of digging, and at about the same layer as you're finding like Roman bathhouses, you find like a dinosaur femur. So something smelled off about the whole way the dinosaurs come out. So it may not be that they didn't exist or don't exist. Which I'll get to in a second. The way that they discovered the dinosaurs, and actually a lot of the dinosaurs that came out have been proven to be like just fake ones, even some in the National History Museum in England, right? But they found dinosaur tibia with flint and stone tools stuck into it, meaning humans were knocking around when the dinosaurs were knocking around. So how does this kind of fit in? Because we don't have all of their teachings. We don't have all of, we don't have, but I don't know. There's lots of the earth that we haven't explored, right? A lot of the earth that we haven't explored. But so what I'm guessing is that, so we have a 75,000 year master harvest, at which point everybody has to be harvested. So you kind of start again. So it's like no cheating. So for many millions of years, anything that's kind of been going 3D. So, we first D is like just amoeba. Maybe amoeba is 2D. I don't know. Single-celled. But I think are amoebas more advanced than plants, technically, because they multiply. I don't know. So level 2, like a Tetris game, right? Level 2 is plants and animals, and the highest of the kind of level 2 food chain, if you like, are dogs, because they are they've been living with humans for 44,000 years, supposedly, maybe millions of years, who knows. But they also have empathy, so we've proven they've got empathy, so they're most human-like. So dogs who are pets, dogs, then cats, in that kind of order. So dogs, most dog-based pets, when they pass, will then come back as 3D form, right? So it keeps going. So every 75,000 years, anything that's 3D gets harvested, whether you go 3D to another planet, whether you go, and I think that's this harvest only, because the Earth is terraforming. So before the Earth is never terraformed, before the Earth has always been the 3D place. So maybe you just kept coming. I mean, maybe I've been here 20 million years. That's really sad. I mean, one of the originals just about figured it out 20 million years later. I mean, probably. I mean, it was quite sad when I thought potentially I was one of the, probably one of the original 75,000 years, as in most recent. But I could have been trying this for 20 millions of years. And we won't know till we die, right? We get told. One of those things we'll just ponder. But yes, so why won't they let us dig down? It's because we find out. It's naughty. So the other thing, the other audio that I'm listening to is Kissinger, and it's a biography written by, I don't know whether he's still the editor of Time magazine, but at the time when he wrote the biography, he was the editor of Time magazine. He also did multiple interviews with Kissinger. I think he said he did like 24 interviews. So there's going to be quite a bit of propaganda in there. There will be lots of things missing, but they do still, do Freudian slips. They do slip up a lot. So I'm reading still the Fauci book. I'm still reading the Ebola and AIDS book, and in that, during Senate hearings, there've been like some very interesting Freudian slips, where they've admitted to the Senate committee that they were actually, using shellfish toxin to investigate cancer and immune suppressing viruses. So why is that weird? Is shellfish is a neurotoxin, and neurotoxins don't create cancer or immune suppression. So this is because it's like origins of AIDS, and they were making cancer viruses, and we've been through that a few times. But so they slip up, right? So even in this Kissinger audio, there's been a couple of things that has been mentioned, and I'm like, oh, I don't think they want us to know that. Like just like a little quote or a little phrase, or and these kind of the older autobiographies and books are important, right? And kind of like books from the 60s, 70s, and 80s are really handy, because that's before stuff was being completely scrubbed, and before the latest edit. So you can actually get hold of information that doesn't exist anymore. Because I try and find references for things and they don't work. So, but I'm going to share a video, and then we're going to quickly talk about Kissinger and Soros, and Goebbels. And then we'll finish up, and I can. Oh, right. Wait a minute. I need to relocate my microphone. Hold on. Before I press play on this video. Oh. Oh, no. Where did that go? That's not what I wanted to do. Let's try this again. Oh, shit. Where's the video? There.
Okay.
Right. Pause. Shh. Right, let's try again.
Okay. In World War II, the Nazis would kidnap certain children, and they would use these children to go act as though they were seeking refuge and send them out to find Jewish families, beating on the door and saying, please hide me from the Nazis. And then these children, under the orders of the Nazis, would then expose the families, these Jewish families, to him so they could round them up and send them to concentration camps. One of these kids, 11 years old, from Hungary, Jewish, was more than willing to do this, and he exposed many families to the Nazi party. They discovered this kid is a little genius psychopath. So much like they did Adolf Hitler, they took him under their wing and they gave him all the propaganda, all the understanding of being a Nazi. Told him all the things he needed to know about how to run companies, organizations, and things like this. Gave him a great education, and he continued to do work for the Nazis right up until the end of World War II, whenever the Allies, they won the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler kills himself. Actually, he didn't kill himself. He flew to Argentina. This was all part of the plan. This was contingency. And so as all the officers were trying to escape to Argentina and the concentration camps were being found, that the Third Reich had stopped right there. It was over. But that kid, who was now 16 years old, was given all of the swag. He had been trained to be a Nazi, and he was made to carry on the propaganda throughout the decades that will follow. They gave him literally tons and tons of gold that they had stolen, that he still has to this day, because this guy is still alive and in his 90s now. Yeah, it's a real thing. One of the wealthiest men in the world, which he has allocated his wealth to different demagogue causes. Yes. And there's several organizations in this United States that you readily know that are championed by the mainstream media that he directly funds and founded. Yeah, not common knowledge. It should be. It's right in your fucking face, but no one knows. It's ridiculous that no one knows this. Well, so few people know this. This guy ran Moderna. Yeah, he was behind so much and still is to this day. His name is George Soros. Of course, that wasn't his birth name. He changed it to that. But yeah, yeah, a Jewish Hungarian Nazi who is there to help his constituents and all the people in the cabal take over the fucking world. Yeah, under the ideology of Nazism. Okay.
Um, okay, so I for those of you who didn't know that, 100% true. There's we're watching another video before I go as well, which is it also talks about Moderna, which is interesting. But so Soros and Kissinger, right? So Soros kind of went full Nazi, and if you watched the original brainwashing video about the kids, or watched the kind of revisit we did the other day, you'll understand why the age range is important, right? Child soldier, pre-empathy, right? So you have to learn empathy. And he was taught from childhood. You get rewarded for following the plan, for doing what we want. Okay, but Kissinger, they escaped. I think he was 11, but may or may not was 13. So he left to America. He hates being Jewish. Like from the things that I've read, like he does not, or is that Soros that doesn't like being Jewish? I was probably getting those two mixed up. It's really interesting when you learn about Soros and learn about Kissinger. They're even though they kind of went different ways, right? Technically, there's so many different common threads and commonalities. Neither one, I would argue, has any empathy. Therefore, making them a psychopath, right? Or sociopathic if they enjoy people. See, I don't think Soros gets a kick out of people being harmed. He just doesn't give a shit, right? He wants what he wants, and he will just do whatever he wants, and do whatever he wants to get what he wants. But I don't know him intimately. I don't know whether he is. It's just, yeah, it's hard to kind of understand that there will be a lot of people who do horrific things to kids because they need to, stroke have to, because of their warped belief system, but actually aren't getting any enjoyment out of it. And there will be some people who get like royal pleasure out of causing harm to others. So not all psychopaths are sadistic or sociopathic, or but every time I've seen Soros talking, he's very cold. Like he wants, and him and Kissinger both want the world to just do what they want and be balanced. And you can have a little bit of power there, but that's about it. And they both kind of doing the exact same thing in different ways, but considering it's really that they're both achieving the same ends, and so Kissinger is responsible for the Depop plan. They wrote the so that was the 1974 national security plan. He manipulated the entire, not just US government, but he manipulated England into Europe. And there's the photos of him with Ted Heath, and we know what Ted Heath used to do, right? so but he was so Kissing is interesting because he was groomed over in England, and so went to America being like England spy queen groomed, right? So is he American? Is he? It's a whole big. So the only way you can describe it is like a clusterfuck, right? Of all these people, all working towards the same goals of them having all of the power. But what's interesting about Kissing Girl in Sorrow, it's most interesting, is they grew up in Nazi Germany, right? They got to see, like, actually see firsthand how to manipulate people, how to effectively turn friend against each other, how to effectively turn families against each other, how to effectively completely brainwash individuals. And so not only did they learn the skills from, let's be honest, the best of the best, because that's what the Nazi Party did. They completely enthralled an entire nation, not just an entire nation, multiple nations and multiple worlds. You know, when Hitler first came to power, everybody thought it was great. Even non-German individuals. So we've got the Ukrainian Nazis today, right? So this Nazis are still being funded. But they got to see it, and they got to incorporate it, and they got to take part in it at that really important age where they ain't going to grow up with any empathy. And I think it's really hard for people to comprehend how little respect they have for human life, because if you've grown up and you do respect and you love and you feel things for other people, then it is horrific that you think about murdering millions of people just because they have a bit of oil that you quite fancy, even though you don't need it, but just because you can, right? So murdering entire like just wiping out England because we just pissed them off, right? Like, so the same as like I might delete somebody from Facebook because they've pissed me off. That's how they feel about people's lives, right? And so when you have empathy, when you care about people, it's really hard to comprehend that. But hopefully, us talking about brainwashing and child development helps you understand how they got where they are. Now, the really annoying thing about somebody who's a psychopath and somebody who's a sociopath, actually, psychopaths and sociopaths, is the only way we change and the only way we heal is if we recognize there's something wrong with us, and we don't want to be the way that we are. And so because we don't want to be the way that we are, we will look for another way, look for something outside of ourselves to help us change, to help us understand a different way of being. Psychopaths and sociopaths don't want to change. They don't see anything wrong with them, so they never will. So it's not that they can't, it's not that their brains are incapable of rerouting, it's not that they're incapable of developing empathy. They just, why would they? Why would they? So they never will, ever. If you have somebody who is a rock solid psychopath, they do not care about trampling millions of people's lives just to get what they want, because they want what they want. And they're also never satisfied, because they don't feel anything, right? They chase power, they chase ownership, they chase like all of these things, but they just feel empty, so they always want more and more and more. Kind of like somebody who is in the heroin habit, was forever chasing the suppression of what they're feeling, never really achieving it. They keep using more and more and more. Somebody who's a psychopath is forever chasing feeling something, and they never do. Sociopaths will never change. and sadistic sociopaths will never change because they actually derive pleasure from causing harm. So they ain't going to want to change either. It's only people who are non-sociopaths and non-psychopaths who seek to change themselves. So Penelope says soulless. They're not soulless. Nobody's born evil, and they're not soulless. They just tuned it out. It's still there. It is there. They tuned it out. Just will be there because we are all light made manifest. There was a video that explained human, right? I love human, the phrase human, and the label human, and hue, it means light, and man as in manifest. So we're all light made manifest. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all just energy. In between, like my atoms is just space. In between my collection of atoms is just space. So that's kind of in a nutshell the quantum physics behind us all being one. Like everything in this galaxy is just light, just the same things, but just energy. So we're just energy, but they have moved away from embracing light, love, and that's it. They've just shut it down. They're not tuned into it and never will want to be tuned into it. And so children who are abused, they kind of develop miswirings. So developmental trajectory, there's things that you need to learn, things that you need to have happen so that you feel loved, you develop trust, you do all of those things. And if the only attention you get is not pleasant attention, you're getting attention. And so there's lots of crazy things that can go on when you're a child, and in how your brain kind of wires together. But I would be very surprised if I could get them in a room, but get them in a room and do some psychometric assessments. I don't, from what I know, so it's based on my perception, and most diagnosis is based on perception and observation. So based on my perceptions and my observation, these two individuals they are devoid of empathy, therefore psychopathic rather than sociopathic, and that makes them more dangerous, not less. Because if you are a child and you have 12 toys, and you just don't care whether you have no toys left or not, you will throw all the toys away, right? If you are a sociopath, you will care if your toys go missing because you derive pleasure out of causing harm. I agree with your definition-ish. I get where you're coming from, but I think it's important that we be careful about creating thems and uses, and creating an other, because they're not other. They are us and we are them. And that's why, there are things that I turn over to Big G to forgive, because I'm struggling. And I'm struggling to see them as me, but I understand it. So understanding it is the first step, right? Understand, acceptance, forgiveness. When we compartmentalize, and when we put barriers up, and when we put labels which differentiate rather than see the similarities, we actually block our capacity to heal. We block our capacity to develop an understanding because we're like, oh, that other person. So, we did talk about I think we were talking about Hunter and, and how we have to be careful because of, he will be doing the things that he's doing because of the way that he was treated. And we all would, right? He's not evil. He's not different. He is a product of his experiences. I say we all would. That's if we were all Hunter, we would, because not everybody who is abused goes on to abuse. It's only about 10%. But if we all grew up as Hunter with his personality traits, genetic predisposition, need for, that one, we spoke about the ball, didn't we? How like one twin catches the ball and one twin doesn't catch the ball, and that forever alters their developmental trajectory. So there could have been. So if we'd have had Hunter's exact experiences, we would be the same as where Hunter Biden is, right? But one chance encounter in Hunter's life, early childhood, could have completely changed how he grew up. So we can't put our personality, our experiences, and judge somebody else because we're not them. We have different knowledge. We understand things differently. We got to experience things differently. But if, whoever grew up as me, with my personality, with my family, with my experiences, would still be me, right? This is like there are no other me's, thankfully, because that would get confusing. But so we are all who we are, and if anybody was trading places and we had the exact same life, is we would be doing the exact same thing, is what I'm trying to get across. Probably not very successfully. Because I get up at 4:30 in the morning. It's quite late now, so my brain stops working. But we need to kind of see each other as all. But so with regards to Kissinger and Soros, they literally learned from Joseph Goebbels, right? They learned how to dictate and manipulate. And, we've got big players manipulating smaller players, and they all take each other under each other's wing, right? So they will take somebody under their wing and they will mold and manipulate a group, right? So, many people want to hate George Soros for what he did, right? And what he continues to do. He was groomed, right? He is playing his part because the part that he was designed for, and I don't necessarily mean like fated, but I mean by molded and created by his experiences, his understanding of the world. We're all just playing our part, and the negative experience, people who are doing the negative stuff, is important, because if we don't have negative catalysts or negative experiences, we don't then want to grow and evolve and become something better. Some of them won't, right? They don't want to become better, but most of us, it's because of that negative experience that we want to change. Otherwise, we'd never want to change, and life would be boring. Life would be boring, right? There's no point to life. There would be no point to life. The point to life is to experience it, and you can choose to live life in a place of joy, peace, abundance, service to others, or, negative, be a neggy Nelly. It's our choices. So I just want to kind of finish up, because I'm tired-based rambling, and I apologize, by going through Goebbels' principles of propaganda. So if you're going to want to learn how to manipulate the world, you might as well learn from the person who kind of perfected the art, didn't they? And do you want to know what's really interesting? Is that Goebbels, so when we were gassing and pretending to, so in World War II, when we were putting out there that we were able, so we as in the Allied forces, the good guys, right? When we were putting out there, hoping it would get back to Germany, that we were able to launch a massive chemical attack and biological weapons attack if they launched it on us, right? If they even so much as sneezed anthrax, we would wipe out the German people. And there is some indication that actually, regardless of whether we were waiting for them to attack first, because that's what was written into the Geneva Principles, was if you're attacked first, you're allowed to defend with chemical weapons and biological weapons. And so we were kind of like propagandaing to say that we could, wipe you out. Goebbels said that they wouldn't tell. So they kind of picked up all of this information. And so I found this in the Nuremberg trial archives, right? He was saying that, we've got evidence of all of this stuff, but we aren't going to tell. We aren't going to tell the German people because we don't have enough masks, if it's true. If it's not true, we've panicked them for no reason, because they will probably down tools and just surrender. So telling people and ramping up the fear, he was just like, do that shit. So the complete opposite of what all of the world did over COVID, right? Which proves, in my eyes, that's kind of like black and white proof, is that it was propaganda. Because if you look at anything else throughout history, and this is why I don't understand history. How do no history teachers, like none of the history teachers should have been fucking fooled into this bullshit. Except maybe the brand new ones, because they're just from, the ones who went from school to university and have no idea about reality. Those ones I understand, because they were just lied to forever and now they're teaching lies. But the older ones should never have been propagandized into it. But at no point throughout the rest of history where you don't build up the fear, right? Except they did it in the Cold War and the nuclear stuff, while they were still like busy mates in the background. So anything when they're selling something, having to sell it. But it was just, I thought it was really interesting that the, father of propaganda, Goebbels, was saying you don't. If you're worried about something, the last thing you want to do is panic people when you can't do anything about it. And when they were kind of like panicking everybody about COVID, there was nothing, right? No vaccines or no treatments. There was nothing that worked. It was just irrelevant. And that is in the injunction. Like this dude. So okay, so Joseph Goebbels, it's only short this. Dr. Joseph Goebbels, beside being an intriguing character, was the propaganda minister for Hitler's Third Reich. He was recognized as a master of propaganda as his work was studied after World War II. Goebbels did not survive well, who knows, right? To enjoy the recognition. He and his wife committed suicide on the 1st of May 1945, a week before the final collapse of the Third Reich. After the war, or he'd already escaped to Antarctic, because they were going to the Antarctic since 1943. So after the war, US personnel discovered a very large diary dictated by Goebbels. In it are his principles of propaganda. So Leonard Dubs' 1950 article details them from a translation of the diary by Louis Lochner in 1948. So Hitler's basic principles. These principles are abstracted from Jowett and Donnell. Avoid abstract ideas and appeal to the emotions. Consistently repeat just a few ideas. Use stereotyped phrases. So what we got? Build back better. What was that? Protect the NHS. One. They use threes, right? So our brain likes odd numbers. 369. Give only one side of the argument. Continually criticize your opponents. Pick out one special enemy for special vilification. So what are they doing with Putin, right? Putin. Russia, 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 Russia. Putin. Goebbels' principles of propaganda. So when reading these propaganda principles, keep in mind that they were applied in wartime, World War II, and involve issues that don't arise otherwise. It's a long list, but Goebbels was dealing with the complexity of an all-out war. It's not that long, actually, to be fair. While reading them, you may realise that some of the principles are generally applicable and not limited to wartime. Some might be quite familiar today, so it's interesting to note that Goebbels' principles derive from Hitler's own ideas of propaganda. It's Freud's cousin, I believe, Edward Bernays, who is also a huge propaganda. Was he the original father of propaganda? And then it went to Goebbels afterwards. He's interesting. So propagandists must have access to intelligence concerning events and public opinion. So that's why they poll. And we spoke about the importance of the polls. And so intelligence is gathering, right? So how do you know what people are talking about? So we've got polls, we've got social media and social media polls, and likes, straight dislikes, retweets, how website hits. So anybody using Google Analytics, like all of that we've fed back to Google. So you got Google Trends. So understanding what people say they're wanting and what they really want, right? So you might go. So a while back, right, McDonald's did these adverts for salad, and I saw the advert on TV, and I was like, and I know McDonald's is controversial. I don't eat McDonald's. I haven't since watching the stuff about the Hammersmith twins. But there was an advert about McDonald's salad, and I was just like, look, if you want a McDonald's, you're not like, oh, I really fancy a salad, let's go to McDonald's. If you want McDonald's, it's because you wanted the burgers and the shit food, right? But people will say, I'm going to McDonald's, let's go with the salad. What they're really doing is going to the drive-thru and having like the Big Mac, right? So what are people saying they're doing, and what are they really doing? I know. It's the only thing that my brain can come up with right about now. Sorry. Don't eat McDonald's. So propaganda must be planned and executed by only one authority. So this is why we have the global cabal all working together. Sorry, my knees get stiff. So it must issue all the propaganda directives. So you have to own mainstream media, you have to own social media, you have to own the controlled opposition. So Joe Rogan, so all of the people who still have huge audiences, still making millions about talking about stuff. So like Zuby blocked me when I reached out to him. So I reached out to a lot of the big people, and they all just blocked me from contacting them. So that's quite telling, right? So you have to control everything. And I say it over and over again: how do you control the narrative? You control the narrative. It must explain propaganda directives to important officials and maintain their morale. I'm not quite sure how the cabal are maintaining morale at the minute, with everybody stepping down, getting COVID, resigning, not standing for another election. Gizzy was in prison. I know that they're kind of doing a retrial, possibly. Maybe it's because they're recycling it to make the public more aware of it. But Hunter Biden's laptop's finally 2 years later coming back around again. I'm not quite sure how the cabal can be like jeering up its peeps where we stand now. And if you're on the side of good, as in towards God, good people, if you can't see how we're winning, then I don't know how else to show you. You need to come into the Telegram group, and the lovely M has been keeping on top of all of the key resignations. So it must oversee other agencies' activities which have propaganda consequences. So again, so we've got the BBC is owned by the license fee. So owned by the government. Channel 4 also gets license fee money. Granada TV, so this is in the UK, right? So Granada TV, which is ITV3, or some ITV3 is Granada TV. That was independent, and then when the Franklin Boys scandal was coming out, David Cameron helped to ensure that was purchased, and that documentary never came out, and I think that was through his wife. I think it was her links that kind of got that shut down, and that's what enabled him to, I would hazard a guess, that's what got him the job as PM, right? He stopped that entire explosive documentary blowing up the pedos in the White House. Because it would have always ended up, filtering back to what's going on in England. Sky's Murdoch, right? We've got newspapers are kind of the same. We've got, Disney, Comcast. They're all owned by the same people. We've got DARPA own Google, CIA own Twitter and Facebook, and or is it CIA own Google as well, or is it joint? Probably joint. To be honest, probably joint. So you own everything. Propaganda consequences of an action must be considered in planning that action. So we saw this with not only the SAGE meetings when they break down how to manipulate people, but why you want to be doing this, but also there's I think it's like 78-page PDF. A presentation on memes and weaponizing memes, right? So if you're going to allow something to circulate, because they could have easily shut memes down, but because they've done that, right? They effectively altered the AI so that it was able to shut memes down and block you from sharing and recognize what images you were doing. They could easily have stopped them circulating. Excuse me. By just, because if every time somebody shared it, nobody saw it, people would not share it. Which is why you get the dopamine rush from the likes and the retweets and the shares. So they will have had to, just for that one specific thing, for example, so we're going to allow these memes to go ahead. What do we need to make sure? How can we, stop the good guys also using this? How do we ensure that we have control over it? How do we ensure that our message is the message that everybody sees? So kind of like I would say backtracking on the slow release about, say, for example, backtracking on the slow release that Eisenhower made about aliens, right? So he had that meeting, and it was the vicar or the priest who said, whoa, you probably don't want to just be like, hello, aliens are real. We've been on Earth for like 20 million years. We're going through a master harvest because the world's already played, right? So that's I'm pretty sure he asked 20 people, and the priest went, you were just going to completely cause havoc. So you've got to do a slow drip feeding, teach people about aliens without teaching people about aliens. So then we had Star Trek and Star Wars and all of those things that talk about the, Confederation. I mean, they use the same names, right? So he'd already started the slow release and the priming for release. So then they need to shut it down, right? So what do? They develop a phrase, conspiracy theorists. They will have had a huge planning session about how do we shut down this now, and how do we ensure that we create something which is used straight away, which just rubbishes everything. Doesn't matter whether it's true, we just find a way to rubbish it. We are a bit of alien, if not alien, period. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that some will be, and I don't know. Maybe if we are 75,000 years to 76,000 years later, potentially with all of the if you go back far enough, potentially all linked, potentially not. Right? Could be different groups of individuals across the Earth at different time periods, and only now actually intermingling. Because we weren't traveling for that long. And I say for that long, yes, for a few thousand years, but in the grand scheme of 75,000 years, that's not that long, right? And even, it was, you couldn't, white and black people couldn't marry, or you might not, so, different religions couldn't marry, and that, religious lines and religions tend to be a line which would cross different ethnicities, right? Different ethnicities would have slight variations on their religious beliefs, and therefore you didn't get into marriage. So I think that there's only a very small window of time for intermingling. So I don't know. I am kind of under the impression that probably people who are allergic to the sun are probably the ones who are the interlopers, who were part of the moved from Mars because you just fucked your own planet up, who were mixed with alien DNA, right? So whoever came from Mars was tweaked with alien DNA so that they could survive on Earth. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, so propaganda must affect the enemy's policies and actions. So by suppressing propagandistically desirable material which can provide the enemy with useful intelligence. So that's like scrubbing the internet, right? Not peer reviewing any of research that would completely destroy the COVID narrative, and even not publishing results of experiments which were done in 2020, because they would prove that COVID was bullshit, as examples. By openly disseminating propaganda whose content or tone causes the enemy to draw the desired conclusions. So again, this is why you've got like people like Dr. Malone, Joe Rogan, we've got Bev Turner, right? Those individuals. By goading the enemy into revealing vital information about himself. How are they doing this? No, I'm not quite sure. They will have been. Can you see this? Yeah. Revealing vital information about himself or herself, obviously. What have they been doing? Well, I suppose if you think about the protests, especially the protests in London, this is what I've always said, don't ever go to the protests in London, right? Because of CCTV, right? So if you want to say anonymous, right? I don't care about being anonymous. But if you wanted to stay anonymous, then the last thing you do is go to a protest in London. And even if you mask, right, you're wearing your mask all the way there, and on the train, and unless you have walked from where you live and you've gone down the old canal tracks, and you've done multiple changes of clothing, maybe you wore a fat suit, or maybe you left the house, you've been living as a pregnant girl on the outside, but on the inside of your house is you're actually a man, really, and you're pretending to be a pregnant woman, and then you go under an underpass and you swap with, you have to do some serious swapping to kind of actually hide yourself. This is why I don't see the point, right? I don't see the point. And it's not about I don't see the point because I've got nothing to hide. I don't see the point because what many people don't seem to understand is, right now, satellites in the sky can look through my roof and watch me taking a shit, right? If they want to. If I was somebody who was really high up on their watch list, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I do, right? But technically, right, goading the enemy into revealing vital information about himself, it could be as simple as, refusing to allow anybody to leave, locking everybody in their home, and then people are gathering in numbers. And so then the baddies know who is opposing them. With regards to age group, age ranges, ethnicity, most working status. So why is that important for the baddies? Because then they can put squeezes on those 3 demographics even more, right? So every time you take the bait, they learn more about who you are, and therefore they get better at manipulating you. They get better at guessing what you may do next. They get better at guessing how far they can push you if they need you to act in a certain way, right? So if you think about one of the latest news articles that's come out from Sajid Javid, talking about, the autumn, I suppose it's spring booster, and we're talking about the autumn booster. And then a doctor was quoted in saying, if we do another lockdown, the people in England will riot. People will riot. So are they priming? Yes, but possibly. But are they also telling the controlled opposition, you need to start organising your protests, and this time we're going to step it up a notch? You need to have already figured out who are the ones who are the most likely to help escalate the situation. You need to, look what they did with that Alpha group, or what they did at J6 with the Proud Boys. Not all of them were feds. Most of them were the baddie, the ones who actually, did the shit, but not all of them were. So every time you actually get sucked into their game, is they get better at manipulating you. There we go. So by making no reference to a desired enemy activity when any reference would discredit that activity. So potentially, was that like posting? No reference to a desired enemy activity. Maybe that's supposed to be would credit that activity. Because the enemy wouldn't want to discredit the activity. So if you take, for example, the protests, if people didn't talk about, mainstream media didn't talk about the protests because they didn't want people to know about it, but they spoke about the trucker staff because they wanted people to be involved. I'm not sure about that one. I'm not, because it's a translation of a translation of a translation, right? Yeah. Declassified operational information must be available to implement a propaganda campaign. Whoa, look at that. Declass stuff. There we go. So declassify information about aliens. So just enough to get people talking about it, sharing information. And so this is what I think, right? Flat Earth, right? And I know some of you are all in on Flat Earth. Holy Earth is the one that I think is potentially more likely than it being flat. Yes, the dimensions that NASA are given, probably hugely inaccurate. Doesn't mean that it's not round, right? You manipulate a teeny tiny bit of a fact in order to throw people off. But yeah, so declassify information. To be perceived, propaganda must evoke the interest of an audience and must be transmitted through an attention-getting medium. So, we got BBC for the sheep, Joe Rogan for the awake sheep. I really don't like him. That's why maybe, if I'm tired, I will be vibrating lower, and it's easier for me to kind of pick on somebody. But I just, I think because I just feel frustrated about the awake sheep. So people who are supposedly awake who are just following other sheep, right? So more attention getting mediums. So we've got, and Russell Brand, right? We've got, celebrities, Hollywood, he's a tube. Credibility alone must determine whether propaganda output should be true or false. Oh, conspiracy theorist or expert, doctor or anti-vaxxer. So this is where labeling is really important. So because we're the BBC, it's true. Because they're Russia Times, it's false. That's it. Doesn't matter if it's the other way around. Because we're the UN, what we say is true. We are peacekeeping. It doesn't matter that we have been multiple tens of, if not hundreds, if not thousands of UN peacekeepers have been arrested for drug trafficking, child abuse, for theft, for arms dealing, for all of those things, but we are peacekeeping. And it's an isolated incident, right? They're all isolated incidents. So the purpose, content, and effectiveness of enemy propaganda, the strength and effects of an expose, and the nature of current propaganda campaigns determine whether enemy propaganda should be ignored or refuted. So what we see here is, so Tories information, Tory says his information is always ignored, right? Because you don't want to, so if you refute something, you still draw attention to it. So when I am working with parents who are helping their children alter the way that they are functioning, i.e. teaching them not to be psychopaths and sociopaths, is when they do behaviours, regardless of how vicious the behaviour is, you just ignore it, right? If it's a bad behaviour, you do not draw attention to it. And one of my clients' kids, he was 10, he used to rip radiators off the wall, like literally pulled the telly, like lifted the telly up and used to throw it across the room, right? And you're sat there thinking, well, how the hell do you ignore that? Well, you ignore it in the safest way possible. And you make sure the child, you just hold it. And I said to the mum, because the kid was bigger than the mum, I was like, well, you if you have to, you sit on them, safely sit on them. But you sitting on them and while they're throwing a temper tantrum is actually safer than them ripping a radiator off the wall and squishing themselves, right? So whatever, but you don't attend to them screaming, you don't attend to them, so you are inattentive as safely as possible. But so if they are completely pretending something does not exist, and what they're doing is just nobody mentions it, right? That will be the strongest ammunition. If it's refuted, I would argue, based on the information that I've seen, so this won't be an all, this is based on the information I've seen, things that are refuted will be controlled opposition stuff, because you have to control the narrative, right? Same as this Kissinger book, right? It was written by the editor of Time at the time of writing. And there were parts of it that Kissinger refuted. I mean, there's probably parts of it in the book that he will have ignored because you don't want to draw attention to those bits, because how many people will just read it and not realize the importance of that one thing? Or if somebody slips up, and Freudian slips, you ignore that because you don't want to draw attention to it, and you will hone in on something else that you want to be part of the counter propaganda. Credibility, intelligence, and the possible effects of communicating determine whether propaganda materials should be censored. I mean, they've been trying that, and they're not doing very well with that at all. Nazis burnt books. They started, they censored. Okay, well, they censored. I don't mean off like social media, but they green eggs and ham got censored. Enid Blyton getting slapped with an R rating. These things, they're. And why are they doing those things, right? Because it's ludicrous. Because when they're doing something like that gets the national press and gets people like us going, oh my God, they're just so fucking idiots. They're doing other shit in the background and nobody's paying attention to. So a lot of the time, if they're censoring something, well, other than, Trump, Russia Times, shutting people down who are actually showing the truth and are not sellouts. If they are making a big thing about the thing that's being censored, is because they're saying, look over here and not over there. Because they would just shut it down, right? Because they don't want you to know. So they would do the ignore and close down rather than censor it in big song and dance. Material from enemy propaganda may be utilised in operations when it helps diminish that enemy's prestige or lend support to the propagandist's own objective. I love the fact how we're the enemy, right? And so what do they do here? So they may use sound bites. So prestige. They won't care about the prestige of the enemy with regards to, so say, for example, you are the fly in their eye. So they wouldn't care about calling me, they wouldn't care about diminishing my prestige with others, right? But they will focus on sound bites that diminished my prestige amongst other people who are like-minded. So TED. So TED has slapped something on my talk, pretty much saying she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. Don't go to her for any kind of medical information at all whatsoever. It's all based on her personal knowledge. It's just all bullshit what she's saying. So that has affected my prestige in relation to anybody else who did TED Talks, right? So they're doing it with Tory and Garrett Ziegler now by doing hit pieces, and all of the controlled opposition are doing hit pieces to diminish their prestige in our eyes, right? And so multifaceted, right? So they want to diminish diminish their prestige in our eyes, but at the same time elevating others as to who we should be listening to. So you can't listen to those people because of this. You need to be listening to this person. So what is it, Jack McKay or whoever it is, who's now said, Hunter's laptop will be in everybody's hands very, very soon. And I'm like, but why are you doing it 2 years late when Rudy Giuliani was on OAN, June, July time, saying any media outlet who wants a clean version of Hunter's laptop can get one. He literally said that, and nobody went and got one. And some places went and got one, and they've been doing like slow drips of information, right? I mean, I don't want one. No, I didn't want one. No, I haven't got the time. I'm not even registered as an independent journalist. I'm just somebody who likes the sound of her own voice. I talk to myself and record it. Anyway, black rather than white propaganda must be employed when the latter is less credible or produces undesirable effects. So black and white is not to do with race. There's black, white and grey propaganda. And we saw this in the Signet propaganda machine thing that I shared with you ages and ages and ages ago. It must be well over 12 months ago, when I was kind of doing all the recon for the terrorism thing. So black, grey and white is just different types of propaganda. I can't remember what each of them mean, but it doesn't necessarily mean like black hats and white hats, as in, pretend or good or bad. It's a specific type of, let's see if I can Google it. Black, white and grey. Grey's in there as well. I wonder where I can find that Signet page. It's probably been deleted now. I'm sure it's been deleted while I was trying to find it. We'll come back to that one while the tab's spinning. Spinning. Here we go. The difference between black, white and grey propaganda. In a nutshell. So grey propaganda is information of questionable origin that is never sourced and whose accuracy is doubtful. Black propaganda is information put out by an imposing government or institution and made to look as though it came from a friendly source. And white propaganda was that whose origin was clearly labelled and which had a transparent purpose. Okay, so white propaganda will be Pfizer, say for example, could be Pfizer's press releases. So we know it's Pfizer and we know that they're trying to sell their vaccine. Grey propaganda is information of questionable origin that is never sourced and whose accuracy is doubtful. So that's all of the newspapers, right? Anonymous sources. An anonymous source has told us that the moon is responsible for the tides, and it has nothing to do with the sun. Nothing at all. It's because the moon, which is teeny tiny compared to the Earth, which is huge, and the moon somehow has a stronger gravitational pull on the water. If the moon had a stronger gravitational pull, then we would be spinning around the moon, correct? Because that's why the moon supposedly spins around the Earth. It's because we have the strong gravitational pull and we spin it. So then technically we're moving the tide, not the moon. But yeah, it's got nothing to do with magnetic fields and the sun, right? So it's all of those sources. It's all of those. It's it's the BBC and New York Times, right? A source from inside the White House, or a source from inside Buckingham Palace, or a source from inside Parliament has told us. Yeah, what source? Because if you haven't got the goods and it's not clearly referenced, I don't want to know. So that's grey. Black propaganda is information put out by an opposing government or institution and made to look as though it came from a friendly source. So we've got examples of this. So during a lot of the Congo stuff in the 70s with the CIA, created stories that went into Congo-based newspapers, and then was circular reported by BBC and places like that. So it planted inside. Yeah, so planted inside friendly sources by opposing governments. Yeah, okay. So there he's saying, so the CIA planting information, pretending to be the government of, let's say Congo. It's not the Congo, was it? No, I can't remember. My brain's really starting to struggle. So CIA planting information. Let's just make it up. So CIA planting stuff inside the BBC is more preferable than a Pfizer press release, when the Pfizer press release is less credible or produces an undesirable effect, i.e. everybody goes, well, we know you're trying to sell us that shit, right? So propaganda may be facilitated by leaders with prestige. So it's really important that you raise everybody up. And actually, coming back to Kissinger, or kind of like in a roundabout way, one of the phrases that the guy used was that he was voted. So if you were going to kind of do it in today's terms, of voted like the person I most want to be, right? He was the unlikely celebrity and the most respected person in America at one point in time. Like everybody wanted to be him. So they build them up, right? So they build up Hollywood, all the celebrities. So who are they going to give prestige over the sheep? So not necessarily over us, but yes, over us. So controlled opposition. So again, how do you control the narrative? You can control the narrative. So you have to set up leaders first, and then you give them the script, and they must stick to the script. Propaganda must be carefully timed. Now, this is not something I do, right? I am not a propagandist, because I find something out and I'm like, oh, this is good information. Let's share this information, right? None of my stuff. And I'm not propaganding you anyway. Yeah, no. So the communication must reach the audience ahead of competing propaganda. So we are seeing this, right? We are seeing this right now with regard to Hunter's laptop. Marco Polo is close to finishing and releasing their report. So the entire controlled opposition has to get ahead of it. They have to completely destroy Garrett and Tory before it kind of comes out. So they're going hard now, and they started with, they've been doing it a lot with the hit pieces and then Bergie. But a propaganda campaign must begin at the optimum moment. So one of the things that Tori says is, so she's very good at making sure that she won't talk about something until it's time. And that'll be based, she'll be using predictive analytics and stuff like that to figure out when is the most appropriate time. So why the most appropriate time? It means it's going to be retained by the people who need to hear it. It's going to have the impact. So if you think about Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, and Britney Spears' information, and they were both covered, but those things can happen in and around the same time, and neither one actually had the impact they could have. So if you think about how effectively we disseminated, and how quickly and how effectively the people disseminated the information about the Ukraine biolabs, right? Within days, anybody talking about it was being removed, but everybody knew. And within 7 days, it was all across the mainstream media, right? Which shows that we have the power to do it because we did it. That didn't happen with Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. And they really controlled that, right? And with Britney Spears' trial, really, with it allowing people to actually see it. We didn't have people on the ground. We didn't have people in the room, right? So the only things we could report were the things that we had access to. It was all filtered through controlled opposition. Like there was no way in. And therefore, there was no juicy, teeny, tiny bit of information that we could share. However, there was, so Penelope, you did share, there was a channel that was, took the transcripts and then turned them into entire shows and narratives. Whether they then took sound bites, so you could have, you need to take sound bites, turn them into teeny tiny little clips, turn those sound bites into memes. There's a lot that goes into actually taking something meaty and snipping it down into, we only ever read headlines. It needs to be 140 characters or less. It needs to be seen, processed, understood quickly and disseminated quickly. And vast majority of people will, I didn't have the opportunity to listen to all of those things, and they're probably not there anymore because they were on Twitch, right? Yeah, good dog. Yeah, and that's what's sad. Because he had the groundwork for Ghislaine's trial going huge, but there was nobody there wasn't enough people knew who'd done it, had the time to listen, had the skills to disseminate the information in a way that it needs to be easily accessible by others to be disseminated, to then drive people back to share the information, right? So if you think about the TikTok videos that are like a minute, it's going to be less than less than 90 seconds is what you need with regards to they've tested, they test this. So 90 seconds is kind of like the golden time when it comes to disseminating like a little mini video. they also say, you know, if you're doing a podcast or a video or something, then people won't listen after an hour. An hour and a half max. And I always say, well, you know, people kind of listen to me for a while. I said, because it's interesting. If you're interesting, you will continue to listen, right? But yeah, and if there's too much information at once, it can get overwhelming. But yeah, so I wonder whether we need to maybe get in touch with Good Dog to see if we can get, if he's still got the original. I mean, he probably does have the videos if he uploaded them. Need to get him in a format. Yeah. We just need snippets. We need sound bites and snippets. So it's because if they're going to do a retrial or a mistrial / retrial, then that information will come back around again, and we then have a second opportunity, right? Anyway, so a propaganda theme. So that would be an optimum moment. This would be potentially us doing something at the right time, right? Ooh, maybe we get something right. So a propaganda theme must be repeated, but not beyond some point of diminishing effectiveness. So the other thing when it comes to like sales and marketing, what they've maybe tested is that it takes 7 touches in order for somebody to kind of really start so people need to, so by touch I mean 7 people need to see and be made aware of something at least 7 times before they're likely to kind of act on it. And it's usually on the 8th follow-up. So the 8th attempt at telling somebody something is when they will kind of like start acting. And most people will try once or twice and then give up, right? So if you've been talking to people in your families, in your friendship groups, and you've only tried once or twice and you've never converted them, is you just haven't tried enough. You need at least 8 times. Well, sorry, at least 7 times, but usually it's on the 8th try when it works. So it just takes time. But if you think about the COVID narrative, and now we've got another variant, and none of the previous variants have actually saw any huge dramatic rises in death. And even like a lot of the vaccinated, like, you know, the double vaxxed who did it for the holidays said no thanks to the boosters. There's those who've had the 3rd booster and now they're looking around going, well, I know non-vaxxed, single vaxxed, and they're still all fucking alive. Why do I need the 4th one, right? Why do I have to just keep getting boosted? Why aren't the 3 working anymore? Does it matter whether those 3 aren't working because it doesn't look like there's COVID? So they've diminished the effectiveness of the variants because everybody thinks it's a joke. Doesn't mean they don't still technically have the powers in place to stamp the boot on, but the people are like, yeah, kind of fool me once. So propaganda must label events and people with distinctive phrases and slogans. So this is the us and them stuff that I was saying, be careful not to do. They must evoke responses which the audience previously possesses. So labels are really important, really important. So anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist, Nazi, which is interesting because I get called a Nazi for talking about politics and being pro-Trump. But the actual Nazis in the Ukraine, they're not Nazis, they're far right. I mean, I'm not even far right. Like, I wouldn't even call myself right. I'm not left. I'm in the middle. Like, I don't care what the fuck you do with your life as long as you're a consenting adult. I think you should all work to earn a living. If you can't work for genuine reasons, I think as a society because we're nice people, good people, we have a duty of care so that everybody gets an opportunity to have a standard of living. But if you're just choosing not to work, then I think the only way you get your benefits is if you, the person who is going and picking up the litter, like, you should be working for the community. So you should be getting paid, because you'll go find a real job, right? But so I'm in the middle. I've always been in the middle. I only helped the Conservatives because I was starting up my own business and they were going to give me a loan, and I got a loan, and then I wanted another loan that the Labour government wouldn't give me a loan to start my own business, right? That was it. Oh, I can't see those links. Oh, you sent me, other people might be able to click on those things. Have you dropped it in Telegram? Good stuff. Yeah. Thanks. So you have to prime people to what those labels mean, and then you need to start using them. They must be capable of being easily learned. So simple slogans used over and over and over and over and over and over again. Can't be complicated language. Can't be anything that needs a degree to understand. It's got to be, so if you think about it, it's got to cross all the divides. And if you can, it's got to be it's got to evoke emotions. You got to separate the us and them. Makes what the differentiating. It must be utilized again and again, but only in appropriate situations. So the appropriate situations, call me an anti-vaxxer, never, because I've got vaccines. I've had them. I've had multiple vaccines. How can I be an anti-vaxxer when I've had multiple vaccines, right? Oh yeah, I'm not anti-gene therapy either. I think people who want to have gene therapy, go for it. I'm pro-free will. I'm not anti anything. Pro-free will. They must be boomerang proof. So I would argue that nothing is boomerang proof. If you have an intelligent enough individual, they would be able to kind of twist it back, because you can only see the world from your perspective and your experiences. So I would believe potentially something is boomerang proof because it's based on my understanding of the world, my interpretation of events and my experiences. But somebody else who has different interpretation, experiences and understanding will have different answers, right? So I would say nothing is boomerang proof. I agree with the concept. You don't want to be putting something out there that's going to come and slap you in the face, like calling me an anti-vaxxer, me going, I've got a vaccine, so I've got multiple vaccines. Like, my facts don't give a shit about your feelings, right? So you don't want to, if you're doing propaganda, you don't want to state your information based on facts, because there will be facts that contradict your facts. You will do it all on emotion and feeling. The LGBTQ plus 3 million other labels feel victimized because they feel underrepresented in society. They're less than 1%, and they have an entire month of celebration compared to women who are 50% of the population who have one day. And I don't think men even get a day, right? And lots of people are like, well, men have all the days. Like, no, if you're going to do a women's day, you need to do a man's day. And then by doing a separate LGBTQ plus 300 million other label day, is you are saying that you are separate. So what do they get? Gay people aren't men? That lesbians aren't women? Is that what you're saying? But anyway, yes, hard to retain information is linking it to music or smells and specific types of music. So if you are learning maths and you play, I don't know, Beethoven's Fourth every time you play maths, every time you're learning your math stuff, if you play Beethoven's Fourth in your mind, you will recall that information. If you are playing Beethoven's Third Symphony while learning history, you just need to play Beethoven's Third Symphony and you will recall your history. Same as if you smell like orange while doing English, and then smell jasmine while doing geography, you could smell the jasmine and recall geography. So smell is stronger than sound because smell has a 30-second link to your amygdala. It smells faster. So this is why, a lot of people who experience PTSD, it'll be a smell that actually triggers it. I mean, I know people talk about, a car backfiring, and that's the thing that triggers somebody who's potentially been, over in Afghanistan and Iraq and all of those war zone places. But I would hazard a guess that's because they're not wandering around the street where they are smelling dead people. And I would not want to do that experiment to see. But with other experiments have shown that smell is more. Yeah, and it'll be because chances are the exact smells. So and a lot of the times they're a unique mix of smells. So say for example, if there's an event that happened and it was just after the rain, so you get that, the rain's drying smell, and there's also jasmine, flowers, and there's a unique aftershave, and all three are the combination that your brain needs triggered. So smell tends to be quite a lot more complicated, whereas sounds tend to be a lot more generic, I guess, and easier replicable. But like I say, it's not something that I've seen it being used on extreme trauma, trying to figure out, is this smell making you have is it the smell or is it the sound that's cool? Yeah, just with regards to memory recall and the speed at which memories and the depth and the vividness of memories that are recalled scent is more powerful. So PTSD is just memory recall, kind of, but on a more powerful level. that kind of makes sense. It's not what I believe PTSD is, but that's the going theory. So I believe PTSD is timelines merging, because all timelines are running at the exact same time, and you just like, I've seen people I've had PTSD, and I've seen people going through episodes, and they're here but they're not here. Like their physical body's here but they're not actually here, right? And if quantum physics says that multiple universes, multiple timelines all happening at once, same as ghosts. I don't think ghosts are trapped spirits. I think it's just, it was such an emotive event, there's a up in the timeline, and you have to be on the same frequency and same emotional frequency as the ghost or the spirit, in order to kind of see it. So we've all got to be like, it's a vibration thing and frequency thing, and smell triggers the emotions to trigger the frequency faster than sound. Same as like light's faster than sound. So it might just be milliseconds and it might be split seconds. But if you're going to like teeny tiny microseconds, I would guess. So propaganda to the home front must prevent the raising of false hopes which can be blasted by future events. So, I mean, they purposely so they did that. I mean, they did that. These are the things that they did back. Raising false hopes, right? So they raised false hopes purposely, by, you know, vaccines going to release you all, 2 weeks to lockdown, and then everything's like, they did this shit on purpose. The underneath one's really interesting, right? Must create an optimum anxiety level. Propaganda to the home front must create an optimum anxiety level. So propaganda must reinforce anxiety concerning the consequences of defeat. So if we don't get the vaccine, we're all going to die. Everybody's going to die. If Putin invades Russia, if Russia invades the Ukraine, there's going to be a nuclear war. If Trump stays president, there's going to be nuclear war. If we vote Brexit, then we will all starve to death because Europe won't play ball. And then Europe stopped like allowing lorries and food and shit through, right? They kind of like, they threatened and they follow through. Propaganda must diminish anxiety other than concerning the consequences of defeat, which is too high and cannot be reduced by people themselves. So the vaccine, right? The vaccine did this. So if we don't get the vaccine, we're all going to die, but don't worry because the vaccine's coming and it's coming really fast and everybody can have it. This new strain is out and everybody's dying, but don't worry because we've got a new vaccine which will stop that. So it's okay. And you've had one before, you've had two before, and they were fine, right? You were fine because nobody's dying from these vaccines because we're ignoring that. We're ignoring that because even if we mention the people who are having adverse events, and then you remember that you're not in a risk category for actually getting harmed by the vaccine. So you're only, like, the majority of people who had the vaccine had the vaccine knowing they were not at risk from COVID, They were doing it to protect the people that they love, right? This is why we have to be gentle with the people who've vaxxed, right? If, however, you're not at risk yourself, but you have a 40% chance, I know this is just made up numbers, right? 40% chance of having a heart attack from the injection, of which you're not at risk of the disease, but you're going to give yourself a heart attack, potentially, because you may give it to somebody else who may die from it, but also has a really low chance of dying from it. That would stop you, right? Self-preservation. Musky Moldy said, yeah, scent. So there's a particular scent. So a lot of the time there were no scents involved in many of my experiences. But the one time there is, and it's Garnier Fructis shampoo. And I smell that and I'm back there instantly. So swimming, when you go swimming, like somebody who's always got Garnier Fructis shampoo. And it just somebody opens the shampoo and I'm back there. Instant. And now I can smell it. Like I can smell it, and then the event's playing in my mind. As though, for those of you who've never had, like, as though as I'm watching it on TV, like it's in like Technicolor. Like I can describe everything in intimate detail. Like it doesn't matter because I've like moved through it. Like I've dealt with, I'm blessed to have had my journey as my journey exists so far, and I will be blessed for everything else that comes afterwards, even the bits that don't seem like fun, right? But it just plays in the background because it's a memory. That's all it is now. So propaganda to the home front must diminish the impact of frustration. So inevitable frustrations must be anticipated. Being locked down, you can't go on holiday. You have to stay at home. So we're going to follow you. Kids are going to have to be at home. We're going to still teach them. We're going to reduce the workload a little bit so that you can work as well. We're going to make everything online. We're going to, prop up Joe Wicks, who's going to be an international freaking exercise star, who now has a cookbook out, by the way, everybody, in case you're wondering. So you can all get fit and healthy. We're going to make sure that all of the gardening programs randomly are all talking about growing your own food. And then 6 months later, we're going to make it illegal for you all to grow your own food. They tried that in England as well, didn't they? Over here they said it was poisonous, right? But so they already, I mean, this is, they are doing impact assessments. Like they're looking like, if we make this move based on the past, this is predictive analytics. Like if we do this, what are they going to do? And then when we do this, what are they going to do? So in sales and marketing, I love, I don't really talk about the kind of entrepreneurial stuff, but I am in love with this guy called Russell Brunson. He's just freaking amazing. Absolutely love him. And if I ever got to meet him, I'd probably faint, right? But he's amazing. One of the things that he says is that every time you solve a problem, you create more problems. So if you're selling somebody something, you have to already know what they're going to need next. And those are the things that you upsell, right? So if I'm selling, if I'm selling my my workbook, the problem I'm creating is it's about 600 pages, right? So people that have time to potentially may not have the time to sit down and read it all, but they need it. So my upsell would be something that ease and speed, right? So also have the audio version for an extra 17 quid, right? Easy. And now they've got the audio version and they've got the book. They can definitely do those things. So what's the problem they're creating is that they're going to have no accountability. So my upsell will be, so I've got an online community where you can come and join me every single morning. But then, so what other problem am I creating? Well, not everybody who I work with is in the UK, so 8 o'clock in the morning is no good for my USA peeps, right? But it's all recorded and you can catch it live whenever you wake up in the morning. And if you don't like video, there's also the MP3 download. So you see how every step of the way you kind of go, right, okay, well, this is the solution, but I'm also creating another problem. This is a solution, I'm also creating another problem. So this is where they will be will have been going, and every time they kind of reset. So we had like smallpox, so they reset. Then we had World War One, and they reset, or swine flu, Spanish flu and World War One, and they reset. Then we had what was the pandemic before World War Two? Do we know? Nobody's really talking about that one. Maybe it didn't come. Probably will have come. Anyway, they just hit the reset button and start again, right? They're like, this happened, this happened, this happened. So, frustrations. So people like you and I having conversations, how do we stop that? Well, we don't allow them to meet in pubs, right? Because that's what they did back then. We also would just kick them off the internet. But they didn't anticipate Telegram coming up, right? Or Twitch actually being a stronghold for quite a while, or so you've got to know, you've got to be 10 steps ahead before you kind of start implementing something, and hope you're not actually 10 steps behind the other people who have been goading you into it at the right time for them. Inevitable frustrations must be placed in perspective, and I'm assuming you just need to hierarchical order which ones are the ones that you kind of focus your attention on, which ones you ignore, which ones you rebut, which ones you really push. They haven't stated what they mean by perspective, but I would assume, and assuming makes an ass of you and me, right? Propaganda must facilitate the displacement of aggression by specifying the targets for hatred. They've got to get you angry because they've got to get you easily molded and manipulated. So they've got to get you anxious, and then they've got to get you angry. But you must be angry at these people. So that's why they prop up Bill Gates, right? And I said, as soon as they started talking about it, throwing him under the bus. Soros, gotta be angry with him. Kissinger, gotta be angry with that person. Queen, gotta be angry with that person. Bozo, gotta be angry with that person. Because when you're angry at these people, you're not looking at what's really going on over here. Right? Look at me, look at me, look at me. You're not really looking at what's going on over here. Everybody's got to be angry at Hillary Clinton, and we stay quiet about Obama. Everybody's going to be angry at Joe Biden. You've got to stay quiet about Obama. Everybody's going to be angry at Trump because, we're going to be angry at Putin and Trump because we can't have you looking at all the shit that we're doing behind the scenes. Then finally, Propaganda cannot immediately affect strong counter tendencies. Instead, it must offer some form of action or diversion or both. So it's pretty much saying, like, don't go after things head on. So I would say that we've got actions. So I'm going to come back to what's going on in England. Actions or diversions, and I would say these are both what we've been seeing with the faux lawsuits, the faux criminal investigations, where go and file your victim statement. With the police. The police don't actually want it, but they want you to file. So even if the police do start looking, they then have like hundreds of thousands of pages to read through, to follow up on, to take statements, like time, right? So that is both, that's forcing us to take action in a way that we think we're going to be benefiting, so that we're not paying attention to what else is going on, and it's also a diversion. We've got other lawsuits that are filed that we're told are amazing. They're not. We've also got the Nuremberg style trials that are happening with Rainer Fulmich, and I can't work out what the fuck the point of those things are, because if it's just a way of presenting information so that it can be easily disseminated, why would you wait 2 years to present the information that you've got, right? I think that's, we've got all of these experts who are now talking and presenting their information, will present their information to in the form of a lawsuit that each individual person can file in their own country, so we can also hammer the courts in our own countries, right? That would have been more beneficial. A consortium of lawyers from across the globe working together, like actually to, in a way that, if 10 people or 50 people get together and all put 10 quid in, this is what you're filing, right? And you just sign it, right? And then, you might need to put 10 quid in again to do a rebuttal or to do an appeal, or I don't see the benefit, right? So that one, 11 o'clock. Look at we're going to be quick, and I say this, and I'm only going to be like 9. Yeah, no, but the propaganda one's important, right? So I hope, my lovelies, I look at my bags. So I've been falling asleep at like 9 o'clock. So I'd not read that before, by the way. I thought it was good. It was interesting. So if you want to do, sell something, like that's kind of like how to sell there. Just a good choice. So have yourselves an amazing rest of your evening. I'm going to go like literally next door and pass out, I think. I look forward to seeing you all next week. So my dehydrator comes tomorrow. I'm so excited. I won't be dehydrating tomorrow. I've got lots of therapy stuff Thursday, and I'll be kind of typing more stuff Friday, and then be back here next Wednesday. So thank you so much, and thanks Penelope for dropping the Ghislaine Maxwell transcripts for anybody who does have some time, who fancies going through them. Any little snippets that you can pull out, that maybe somebody else can make an image for, or a meme for, or a little video clip for. Surprisingly easy. They are all things that I can do. I don't have the time to do them. Genuinely don't have the time to do them, because I've got to do the injunction still. Like that's kind of like my big thing that's like dragging on, because I work for a living. But you know, that would be useful. Maybe a good dog might want to, you know, collaborate, or there's another person, like, you know, Broken Anthem does awesome stuff. So potentially there will be people out there who might want to help, because it's going to come back around again. So thank you very much, my lovelies. Have yourselves an amazing week, and I shall see you next week. Mwah. Bye for now.